In early 2025, their group ran a survey amongst Singaporeans, but the parameters, like basically what demographic group they are, like age, whether they are working adults, students, the elderly, like they just put it as survey and didn't disclose who exactly they interviewed. The whole thing about point one is that you are literally paying SGD $2 to $3 to ride a bus in Singapore. And unlike most countries, Singapore actually does have TRF, like transfers. So to keep it short, ever since distance fares became a thing in the 2010s, your journey only takes into account the amount of distance that you traveled between your starting point and your ending point, your end point. And your fare corresponds to that no matter how many transfers that you've made in between, even though there is actually a limit of like, is it 4 or 5 transfers per single trip allowed? And of course, there's also stuff like express bus fares coming into play as well, but there is actually a fare cap. Whereas at home, we have like, for our buses, we do have flat fares, especially for the buses that run in the municipal areas like Toei 23 wards or like Yokohama Municipal Bus, stuff like that. And even some of the bus services that used to be under Yokohama Municipal Bus or Yokohama City Bus that got transferred over to Kanatu Bus, they retained their flat fares as well. Like basically, it is those are the keto, the routes without the kanji in front. Like if you see a Kanatu bus route that it's only numbers and there are no kanji characters, yeah, those are the ones that were taken over by Kanachu from Yokohama Municipal Bus. And those have flat fare. They kept their flat fare even though they are long distance routes. And some of the bus services are like actual trunk routes. Like for example, it's like comparable to Singapore's trunk routes. Like for example, Toei's 78 from Shinjuku to Oji, or even like Kanachu's single digit. The bus routes that do not have the kanji character in front of them. These are long distance trunk routes, but they charge flat fare because the previous operator also charged flat fares. And I really mean the distance that they travel, the total distance, it is really comparable to that of like the average Singapore bus route. Like from start to end, they take about 1 hour to an hour and 30 minutes. Japan also has like stage fares, like in the suburbs and in the countryside. I mean, not in every case, but there are some routes who still charge flat fare. It's just that most of them, like more often than not, they have this kind of like stage fares, and they can get like really really expensive. It kind of like ranges from 200 yen. Oh, by the way, if you want to convert yen to Singapore dollars, you would just ignore the last two digits. This is just a rough guide. Obviously, it's not exact, but this is basically how I mentally convert them in my head, like the figures. And it could go as high as like for the longer distance routes, like the trunk routes, they can even go as high as like Singapore dollar $8. Whereas the coach buses or like the expressway buses, they could actually cross 1,000 yen, like basically $10 SGD. They're like like four digits and above. But those are like expressway buses, so I don't really count them. Some operators like Tobu, Tokyo, or even some Enoshima Dentetsu bus, like they just call it Enoden bus. There is like Totsuka area, and then there is like I forgot the name, but it's like the non-Totsuka area. Some of the routes they have stage fares, but at most it's just like one jump, or like at most like two jumps, and that's it. So it's not wrong to say that majority, obviously not all of them, there are actual trunk bus routes in Japan, but majority of the bus routes, they happen to be hub spoke. Basically, they start from the middle of nowhere, like it's their bus terminal. They call it shako or something in some cases. They call it eigyosho if it's like a depot. Like shako is usually just a parking space for buses with a container for the bus captains to like lay over, have their breaks. Okay, but the main point is that most of Japan's bus routes, it's literally they start from the middle of in the middle of nowhere, and then they bring you to like the nearest train station, or maybe in some cases more than one train station. Like they actually link up a few train stations along the way. That's also considered hub spoke, because I mean in Singapore, like the best example of it would be Service 11 linking brown, yellow, or orange and green lines together. So yeah, most bus services in Japan, they fall into this category. But even for the services that can be considered the equivalent of feeder bus services in Singapore, like you could think about, let's say, Singapore's 268 if it were bidirectional instead of a loop. For that kind of distance in Japan, by the way, it's still feeder bus services. They could charge you as high as, let's just say, this amount. Usually it's lower, but they could charge you as high as like 5 Singapore dollars just for a feeder bus. And keep in mind, you do not have any form of like TRF, like transfer from the train to the bus, or from the bus to the train, because usually it's managed by different operators. And even if they are the same operator, you still do not get transfer, because bus and train, they are considered like different entities in Japan when it comes to like fare calculation. Although there are some exceptional cases whereby if both the bus and the train are from the exact same company, again, most of the time they do not offer this, but in some cases they would offer you a discount if your commuting route involves a bus, like a feeder bus, and a train. Doesn't have to be a feeder bus, but it could be a trunk bus as well. But like from a bus to a train, both under the same company, managed by the same company. So it's technically still not a TRF when it comes to like the definition of it, but they do offer you a discount. But when I mean like commuter pass, I mean like monthly commuter pass. There's like 1 month, 3 months, 6 months. It kind of depends, like the period. I mean, the number of months, like the period of time that they offer it, obviously varies between like the public transport operators. But essentially, instead of like having this TRF thingy, because fare calculation in Japan, it involves like a lot of operators. So obviously there is no such thing as fare standardization or any of that sort of thing. Because if you tried to do that in Japan, obviously the bus companies would lose out. They would flat out lose money, and they are already running kind of bad frequencies, especially in the suburbs and countryside, because density wise, it's not as high as in Singapore, obviously. So you can take it that in Japan, you pay a lot more for a mere feeder bus, and you do not have such a thing called TRF. Like effectively, DRs, I mean, like the system in Japan, they treat buses and trains as completely isolated systems. Except when there's a train breakdown or there's like a massive delay, and then they would offer you like furikai yuso, and that's pretty much it. I'm not even going to go into the details of that because it's kind of not relevant to the video, and to explain it, I would probably need like 20 minutes, and I'm not that familiar with like that system. So in the case of Singapore, it's not like, oh, every month you commute by a fixed route. You have to declare your fixed route to the customer service officers at the Midori no Madoguchi, or wherever you buy the commuter passes at, maybe at like the bus station's office. So it's not like every month like you pay for the commuter pass like a discounted amount, and then in a few months your pass expires and you have to renew it. You can decide to continue or not to continue, blah blah blah. But in place of that, Singapore's like public transport fare is already considered very cheap, and you guys have TRF. So it's only natural that you wouldn't really expect buses to be light speed, especially when you're only paying this amount, right? But I'm gonna get into that. This one is quite self-explanatory. This one is okay, but we'll get into that. Outdoor boarding, but you have to specify where. And every time you conduct outdoor boarding, you need to have a marshal to check if people are fare evading. Because if, like I told you guys back then, my friend basically told me that if a bus captain fails to spot somebody fare evading and they get caught by the fare checkers, like the personnel wearing a white uniform, not only will the passenger that fare evaded get fined, the bus captain will also get fined as well. So every time you decide to conduct outdoor boarding at just one bus stop, for that particular bus stop, you need a marshal. So let's say you want to conduct it at Khatib. Yishun Ring Road, like there's like 807, there's like 811, and then there's like 812 along this side of the road. For this bus stop and then for this bus stop, you need one marshal here and then you need another marshal here. So again, this is kind of like more of like a policy thing, but just saying it's not as easy when you're trying to like implement it. And I have said time and again, the ideal number of bendy buses in Singapore is somewhere between 200 to 250 or even 150. The maximum that I can ever allow if I were a planner is 450. Obviously not 700. This one is more of like just in response to the horrible layout of the Zhongtong double decker. So yeah, these 2 points, like more convenient road crossings, better bus interchange layouts, I actually agree. Larger bus stops, this one I agree as well. Even though some places there might be space constraints, but if you just put it out generally, okay, this is all right. Better climate control and ventilation at bus stops. Okay, this one you might have to bring your own portable fan, because this one you could only implement it at like the major bus stops. It has to be worth your money. I'm not saying that like passengers do not deserve comfort by any means. I'm just saying this is very, very cost intensive. This thing over here, the failures of like BCM. And the thing is, even if it were PTO control, let's say SBS alone, they cannot possibly manage so many bus routes on their own. That's the reason why in the past, they split it into SBS and Trans Island Bus Services. There was CSS as well, but CSS eventually got eaten up by Trans Island Bus Services, and all of their routes were withdrawn. But realistically speaking, in Singapore, you need at least two. Less red tape, that one I actually agree. More incentives to deliver high quality bus service. Okay, this one is a good point. Up till here, it still seems okay. And then you get into this. Full day bus lanes on normal roads or implementing more bus lanes on other normal roads that do not have existing bus lanes, depending on the context. This one is okay. This one I've already said there is a reason, and you guys already know that I've said this. There is a reason why the Rapid Bus 700 trial failed. And then this one, it's pretty much just feeder express. Sorry, pretty much just like it's already an existing solution. I'm not gonna dive into all of this because I've already explained it like many times. Okay, although from this diagram, Relay Express, faster local connectivity, this one is probably this. Now this one, Direct Express, super fast cross-country connectors. This one is very risky. It has got nothing to do with MRT, but they had this kind of route, like if you just dig up the history books, Singapore did have this kind of bus route. Even Stadium Direct could be considered part of it. But again, there is a reason why they are not so keen in doing this in real life. Like, this is super duper risky. Implications on fare box recovery rate as well. So, in general, I would advise don't do this. This should only be used as a last resort, usually temporary, until the bus network becomes better or the rail network becomes better, I guess. I'm not really gonna go into pantograph charging. They say along main road corridors. They tested it with the linkers, and we all know how that went. It's not the most ideal solution. Although if you're just saying charging station in bus interchanges, okay, this could be good. I don't know what this is referring to, and I'm not gonna comment on this. Hopefully it has nothing to do with like the doors opening and closing or what. But this one, it's a no-go. They've tested it before. I've explained it before. And I don't want to repeat myself. Now, this one is gonna be very controversial. And some of my friends have already reacted to this. So, number one, distance-based express surcharge scheme. So this is basically saying that if you take the bus at the neighborhood sectors or like the normal sectors, you're going to be charged normal fare. And then if you take the bus service through the expressway, the express sector, regardless of whether it's like AYE with a lot of bus stops or TP whereby there are only a few bus stops, or even at an expressway whereby there are no bus stops at all, like BKE for example. So this would basically lead to people only using the bus service for the local sectors, and if you penalize them like this, they're not going to use your bus service. They're not going to take it through the express sector. The reason why these bus services, they all succeed is because they are just normal trunk services. Yes, they run on expressways, but they do not charge express fares. They are normal bus services, and they charge the normal distance fares. That's the reason why they succeed. Now, some bus services, they do have paywalls or even CDS. Not really paywall, but like, okay, in some contexts it's really a paywall. Like in the case of CDS, you get what I mean. It's like if you're using the monthly commuter pass, you cannot use them on the CDS services. But then there is also the travel smart journeys thing, blah blah blah, that comes into play, which means that people would be more encouraged to take CDS services during AM peak or take the MRT during certain periods of time in order to get like some form of discount, blah blah blah. Okay, but still, there are legitimate reasons in why these have express fare. But even having said that, that's not really important. These services succeed because they charge normal fare. So if you were to like again, this is about fair standardization, right? The moment you implement this on these services, because I assume it's like a nationwide standardization, it's just gonna hurt these services. Like people will basically stop taking these services through the expressway because you penalize them with this point. Even if your base fare is like lower, it still doesn't offset whatever you have done with this point. But the one thing that I have against this is this point over here. It says abolition of feeder fare caps. Yes, I know my viewers and I have already discussed about like, let's just scrap the whole trunk feeder classification. But see, here's the thing. This one is an existing thing. Abolish, like the feeder fare cap, it's an existing thing. And you shouldn't take it away for obvious reasons. Like, this is one thing that is just gonna hurt the low income families. Like, let's say this is Tampines. This is like Tampines planning zone, which includes this area, which includes Sime as well, which includes like Tampines North as well. This entire area, okay, the border is basically around TPE. And I believe here as well. This is the border. This one is like Pasir Ris. I think this one is Pasir Ris. And then this big area is like Tampines planning zone. I could be wrong, but just take this as a rough guideline. They are called feeder services for a reason. People only want to take feeder services. I mean, okay, let me rephrase this. The reason why people even take feeder services in the first place is because they only want to commute within a town or a planning zone. But usually people just say town. Either they're coming from like the MRT stations, or they just want to like get from like one part of the town to another part of the town. They don't want to go outside the boundary of Tampines planning zone. They want to stay within, like, they are only interested in commuting within Tampines. So once you remove this feeder fare cap, it's really going to hurt all the low income families or the elderly in general if you abolish it, because the feeder fare cap is one reason why feeder services remain popular in general. Obviously, there are exceptions, but again, just saying this very generally. But this is coming from a group that dislikes feeder services to the core and wants to extend all of them, so you get it. I mean, objectively speaking, it kind of violates the core principles of like bus planning in general. Again, I'm not saying you should do this, but I'm just saying if you wanted to do this, let's say you want to extend 268, I mean, I've already talked about this, but since it's relevant to the video, I'm just gonna bring it up again. I believe 268 is the one that does this. Correct me if I'm wrong. So it's up till here, here, and here. Currently, it loops like this. But let's say you wanted to extend 268. From here all the way till here, this is the feeder part of this part of the route. I mean, like, let's say you want to merge 268 into another bus service. This existing part of 268, which is like the quote-unquote feeder part, this one still has to be flat fare. It's an existing thing. You shouldn't try to change existing things in general. And likewise, pardon my haphazard drawings, but currently it loops like this. This is the feeder part of this route. So for this part and this part, you have to ensure that it's flat fare. And again, I'm not saying you should do this, but I'm just saying if you want to put this idea out, I'm not even sure how you're gonna merge these two services together. Let's say Ang Mo Kio Avenue 5, and then let's say you send it through Buangkok, and then like this. I don't know, like this, up here, like this. Maybe like this. Or if you want to do it, if you want to do it like this, it's also fine. But let's say you really want to prioritize like coverage. So yeah, you could do something like this. So for this orange part, I really don't care what your new fare is going to be like. But for the black parts, this part and this part, the black parts, you have to keep the flat fare. And this is only really applicable to a time whereby in the past, it's basically the stage fares. And correct me if I'm wrong, but this kind of like fare rigging, it's only really applicable to stage fares and not distance fare, because distance fares, like, it ignores everything. Like, even if you say, oh, I want to lower the base fare, it doesn't really help in the grand scheme of things when it comes to like all of these feeder service integrations. It really doesn't help, because distance fares, it's just calculating the fares according to how much distance you travel. It doesn't take into account like, oh, the fare stage rigging. Again, you want to rig, it's only applicable in the fare stage era. So the whole thing about point 0.5, I mean this 0.5 in general, it's just trying to fix a system that it's not even broken in the first place. And then you also remember I did a video about like 338, 60, all of the fare stage rigging shenanigans and stuff like that. That's only possible in the old era. Whether you support this kind of like feeder service integrations in general, it's one thing. But I'm telling you, when you want to bring in the fare system and you want to make sure that you're not sandbagging the existing commuters, it's not that simple, especially when the flat fare and everything, it comes into play. Okay, my mistake. I shouldn't say flat fare. I should say there is a fare cap over here, and then there is a fare cap over here. Again, I know the difference between the two, but again, this video is unscripted and I talk faster than I think, so ignore what I said about flat fare. What I mean is fare cap. I mean, I don't even have to explain this. You guys already know what they mean by this, but this is basically like a little too overambitious, because LTA has already specified that all new services have to be kept under 2 hours or equals 2 hours, and it doesn't affect existing services. But again, like I've explained before, this is a little too much, and this point basically explains why these points are even being brought out in the first place. Like, the whole agenda of this, it basically fuels these other points underneath point 8, especially when it comes to like direct connectivity, like existing direct connectivity. This one, we all know, we're all really skeptical of the way they do things. There is nothing wrong with doing this, but it's how you do it. This one, I'm gonna explain it again. If you want to create a completely new R route or 700 something routes, like a completely new route that has got nothing to do with other existing trunk services, go ahead. If you want to create more express variants, basically E or F or whatever, of existing service, like if you want to create more variants, like peak hour variants or even full day variants, depending on context, There's nothing wrong with it. What you shouldn't do, and I've said this many times, and majority of the bus community has repeated this over and over again. You do not change existing trunk services, like the parent bus services, to this or this. Don't do this. I would rather you focus on whatever new bus service you want to introduce, whatever new bus service variant of existing services that you want to introduce. Just keep it simple. Don't overcomplicate things like this. And finally, they've clarified shorter waiting time, but at the expense of what? I mean, if I just show you the slides like this, obviously you wouldn't understand what I'm talking about, especially if you've watched me talking for the very first time, you don't know what's going on. Like, it just doesn't make any sense if you introduce more direct rides to more places, but you cut off existing direct connectivity in the process of it. And the best example, and I've used this a couple of times, it's the fact that you have your feeder bus services. They kind of like serve different areas. They are only meant to like stay within the town. Technically, there's like 901M here as well. And then there's like 900, 900. And then from here to here, there's like 967. Okay, 967 is extendable. It is a trunk after all, so there's nothing wrong with extending 967 because it's not classified as a feeder currently. So these bus services that I've written in black, I'm gonna use another color. Is this the color contrast? Is it good? Okay. So you already have 858 that takes you to Sembawang, that takes you to Sembawang Shopping Center, that takes you to Chongpang and Yishun and Khatib. And meanwhile, you already have 962 that takes you from around these areas, like this, like this. The blue is 858 and the purplish color is 962. Okay, blue is 858, purplish color is 962. And then between here and here along the main road, you already have like 965, you already have like 969. Or you could literally just, there's the MRT here for a reason, you could literally just walk to here and take 858 if you want to access Sembawang in general. So with that in mind, along the main road, you already have these two bus services. So it makes no sense to, I mean, if you want to extend 967, it's fine as well. Let's assume you extended 967 as well. Okay, good. Now you already have three services. It makes absolutely no sense for you to extend the feeder services to Sembawang, like these areas. It makes no sense to extend the bus services inside these areas to Sembawang, Yishun, or Khatib when there are already other options. Like there's already this, and there's already this. Okay, Canberra it might be a little underserved, but you know what? You could probably extend this to Canberra, but then again, there is already this other trunk services, this other trunk service known as 169, that takes you to Canberra. So you see, right? Like Woodlands is designed with purpose. The trunk services, they take you outside of town. The feeder services, they are meant to stay within the town, like basically stay within the boundaries of the town. And the thing is, the people living in these areas that I've underlined in black, they only really want to go Woodlands or Admiralty. Or even in the most extreme case, they want to go Marsiling, which is possible. Like, there's an intratown, okay, not really this one, but there's an intratown. 913, there's an intratown. 911. You already have connectivity to Marsiling, Woodlands, and Admiralty. You want to access like Kranji without using MRT, that's fine. You have 960, you have 961, you have 925, okay, which is not full day, but you get the point. You still have like some form of like connectivity. You guys are really lucky enough in Singapore, because in Japan, unless it's like high density enough, most of the time they wouldn't even offer you this kind of connectivity, direct connectivity, or cover these many areas. Okay, main point is that in Japan, you wouldn't really get this kind of connectivity and coverage or frequency. Every single thing, it's absent. So you guys are actually pretty lucky in Singapore. Again, in the areas that I've circled in black, nobody is really asking for connectivity to Sembawang, Canberra, Yishun, Khatib, Chongpang, or whatever. Because, you know why? There is already 858. And if you want to go to Sembawang, there's already 962. Or along the main road, there's already 965 and 969. That's the reason why nobody is asking for this kind of connectivity in the first place, even if you decide to extend the feeders. But if you guys want a super duper generalized rule, a feeder service, it's only extendable when the endpoint of a feeder route, it's like a, how do I put it? It's like a dead end. And the other condition is that nobody would take the feeder through the looping point. You get the idea. So one example, 273, it calls the residential side and not the forest side, and people actually take this bus service through the looping point as well. So this alone makes it such that 273 is not extendable. Whereas 235, it loops at Caldecott. And Caldecott is like a dead end. Only the dead end feeders, whereby people do not take the bus service through the dead end, and I've said this many times, only these feeder services are extendable. Because in the case of like 374, unless you make the bus service do something like this, you're gonna have like, okay, you cut away this bus stop, but then you offer this. There is always a downside to this kind of bus planning in general. It is like impossible to, it is kind of impossible to extend 374, like downwards in this case, without compromising existing sectors. Because even a change in direction, like which side you board the bus from, is enough to effectively deter people from taking the bus service. Remember the 992 amendment that caused a lot of outrage, the fact that they have to cross the road and then there might have not been enough rain shelter in that area, and also the change of bus stops in general. These are feeder services, these are not trunk services. It is a lot harder to amend feeder services because of this very reason. Not saying that you shouldn't extend feeder services, but when you extend it, you have to do it really carefully. In the case of 268, you have to shift this bus stop over somewhere around here, so that you can make 268 bidirectional. And keep in mind that when you make 268 bidirectional, you have to ensure that 268 is still able to touch at least one bus stop pair in along Ang Mo Kio Avenue 5, so that the passengers can hub spoke from 268 to other bus services, or from other services to 268. You still need at least one bus stop pair along Ang Mo Kio Avenue 5. If these conditions are not met, you cannot just haphazardly extend bus services, especially when your feeder service doesn't have that kind of like dead end loop. 284, at Clementi Avenue 4, it's a literal dead end. Obviously, you cannot extend it, otherwise your bus would just fall into the river, the canal. I mean, to all of you watching this, please stop integrating 284 with other feeder services. It just doesn't work. So this one, it is a dead end, and it is extendable. This one is not necessarily a dead end, but the actual conditions of the roads and the bus stop placement make it so that this one is somewhat extendable. Then there are some feeder services that could be extended, but might involve compromises to the existing commuters in general, which is basically these. But when you have feeder services that are like this is not a dead end loop. When you have feeder services are like this, and then people need a hub spoke like this, it's just a lot of hub spoke, basically. When you have feeder services that are like this kind of route is not extendable. 307 South, which used to be 301, the old 301, right? I mean, it used to be like this, and then they changed it like bidirectional, and then they changed it so that it's like this because, oh, they want the hub spoke outside, and then they decided, okay, we'll skip these bus stops and we'll make it so that 307 is now like this. This looks like a dead end, but it's not. The road configuration over this along this area also pretty much prevents 307 from being extended. So this one is really a good example, but again, these two hub spoke pair of bus stops need to be kept so that people from here could access here and people from here could access here. So yeah, not the best example, but yeah, I think this one is a better example. This is one example where you shouldn't carelessly extend feeder services. And I mean, this thing is only meant to stay within Choa Chu Kang, so you shouldn't extend it. Now there is one controversial one, 301. I myself have like floated this idea before. This is its current route. So if you want to extend this thing downwards like this, you could. It's just that you need to make sure that if you transfer from 301 to 301 at this pair of bus stops, you kind of do like the 386. 386, it's like at Edgefield and Edgedale Plains, one side of the road is for one direction, the other side of the road is for the other direction. You do it like this. But when you do this to an existing bus service, you do this to 301, you have to make sure that if passengers transfer at exactly these bus stops, you need to make sure that you do not penalize them. And extending 301 out of like Choa Chu Kang boundary, that in itself has implications on like overall service reliability in general. But since it's just Tengah in this case, okay, it's not really going to affect much. So it's not like this thing it's going to run into any major roads that are prone to congestion or anything. Even if you have bus lanes, that doesn't automatically solve congestion. I just want to put it out there. I've already explained this many times why you shouldn't do the feeder service integrations at all, or even if you wanted to do them, you shouldn't do them haphazardly. But all these measures have to be in place if you want to extend bus services. You make it so that you do not get penalized for transferring between these two bus stops from 301 to 301. And keep in mind that I know I've floated different ideas around about like why not we delete this sector. It's just like floating different ideas around. But then I realized, okay, it's gonna do more harm than good. So eventually I'm not perfect, okay? Like there was a period of time whereby I wasn't that good at bus planning. But what I'm trying to say is that as much as possible, when you want to extend services like these, and then let's say you put the like when you transfer between these bus stops, you're not gonna get penalized. Okay, you need these measures in place. But then the other thing is that all the existing sectors of 301, which is highlighted in black, I mean, underline, not underlined, but traced out in black, you cannot touch any of the existing sectors because that's just the way the route was designed to be. It serves a purpose. It brings people to Chua Chu Kang Primary School. That's just one example, but you get the idea of why you shouldn't haphazardly rearrange your feeders and trunks or completely destroy the purpose of like these services by I want to skip this bus stop, skip that bus stop, skip this sector, skip that sector, and then just play around with bus services like as if they're like, you know, the one big error that many bus planners are like who aspire to be bus planners, the one mistake they make is that they make it so that they play connect the dots when it comes to like reorganizing trunks and feeders or just eradicating feeder services altogether. They do this kind of nonsense and they end up, it's like no matter how much they try to say that, oh, we provide direct connectivity to different places because, oh, we extended our feeder services so that we can serve new areas, but like whilst in the meantime, I mean, sorry, at the same time, conversely, they cut off existing connectivity. You introduce more, but you cut more, that kind of thing. This is why I say only some feeder services are extendable in the sense that you introduce more to the route, but you don't cut away existing parts of the route in any form. This one can only succeed if you do it properly, same for this. But there are some feeder services, like I've mentioned many times, whereby it's just not extendable, so just leave it as it is. Because when they say selected feeder services, I mean, come on, there was a point in time whereby they literally tried to get rid of all feeder bus services. So take it as you will. This one, not always the case. Bendy buses, as much as I like them, are not able to solve bus bunching issues at the major bus stops where there's a lot of like boarding and alighting when your demand is too high to cope, like for any form of bus to cope. I'm not saying replace them with MRT by any means. I'm not saying that. Or tram or whatever. I'm not saying that. You see, even in this diagram alone, like your trunks are spread out, your feeders are spread out. They are not meant to be combined together. If you combine them together, you end up cutting the direct connectivity to like Admiralty MRT, for instance, because of the way Admiralty MRT is positioned. Because like I said before, this thing pretty much just transfers the problem elsewhere instead of like actually solving it. Because it's like there is this thing about duplicating, but in a good way, instead of like complementing existing services, trying to get another bus service to help out. No, this one, it just brute force merges them together, which causes a lot more issues than actually solving them because you used to have like different bus routes like this, for example, but now you force all the commuters to, let's say you cut away all the other routes, you force them to use only this one service. It's just going to worsen the demand, worsen the crowd levels on this one service in the name of saving resources. But really, the root cause of this is that this is basically the root cause of everything. They cut away the trunk routes, or they force the existing trunk routes to skip stops. And in compensation, to make the trunks less windy and to make the feeders more windy in compensation for all the lost sectors, they try to extend the feeder services. They try to make feeder services do the job of trunk routes with these bus services as an inspiration, even though I've already mentioned many times it's completely taking it out of context. That is not the purpose of the feeder services that I was referring to. You get what I mean, but all I'm trying to say is that you do not make a feeder service do the job of a trunk route. Whether the trunk route is short or long distance, you just don't use a feeder to replace the way the trunk sectors, or use the trunks to like eat up the feeder services. It just doesn't work like that. Combining two feeder services, provided you do it properly and they still operate within the town's planning boundaries, I'm still okay with it. But you do know that this is basically the root cause of all of this haphazard planning. I mean, in a sense, right? When you look at this entire thing holistically, you might claim that, okay, you make it so that the feeders serve more areas outside the town, which then makes it no longer a feeder service. Okay, I get that you guys just hate feeder services. But in compensation, unless your feeder service is like any of these examples that I've mentioned, what you're effectively doing is that you cut away the existing sectors of feeder services, and then you extend said feeder services to new areas. So it's not like, yes, you're like giving them direct rights to more places, but at the same time, you are cutting off existing direct connectivity. And at the same time, when you bring it back to like point 8, this part to be exact, the existing trunk services, as a result of what you're trying to do nationwide when it comes to like the bus network, if you realize where this is going for my newer viewers, you will realize that this is equivalent, okay, not equivalent, but like this is basically like in broad daylight trying to reduce the connectivity in general for trunk services because you skip bus stops. Then when you tie it all up to 0.5, it just doesn't go well together, and 0.7 as well, because you know that LTA is not dumb enough to actually implement this. They know the reason why the 700 trial failed. But you do know that like, okay, points 1, 2, and 3, they're still okay. And then this is where kind of like it all falls apart, because when you really deep dive into points 4, 5, 7, 8, and 9, you guys know why it doesn't work. Okay, now this one. There used to be PPSS, which is peak period short services. Peak period short working short services. Whatever it stands for. But basically, the feeder services used to have like P variants. And instead of like city buses, they use coach buses. And why the scheme failed was because using a coach bus for like an average less than 25-minute ride, it's not worth it. And it's like Singapore's like start stop traffic, especially in like the neighborhoods and everything, and then implications on like fuel consumption when you idle at the traffic lights, and then you're using a coach and not a city bus, which consumes more fuel, if I'm not mistaken, because the buses are bigger, right? And they would use more fuel, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. But yeah, it's because of the start-stop traffic and the fact that people don't even sit on the actual coach for a very long time. That's the reason why PPSS eventually failed. I don't really have a problem with this. It's just that whenever I think of this, I just think of it as, oh, there is already not existing, but there is an example that used to be a thing. So this is not like a new thing per se, but I don't really have a lot of input comments when it comes to this. Just hopefully, I hope you guys who have like especially watched me yap and scream for a long time know why points 4, 5, 7, 8, and 9 are complete bullshit.